This is our unboxing slash build explanation of the FPV 250 Ghost version 4 from Hobbyking and Diatone. We thought we'd make the video because there's no instructions that come with the quad. We bought these just as little night flyers, so we thought we'd just give you some tips on what we're doing and why. A little explanation. We're unboxing this green one. We had some problems with our video before, so you'll see the green one for this unboxing and explanation of the parts, and then we have an orange one that we have partially that we're working on building, so we'll continue with that. So this is how it comes. It comes in a little plastic case like that, cellophane wrap. That's just the cover card, and then this is the contents of what you get in the box. There's a power distribution board. There are 4 LED, I guess, pieces for each arm that bolt to the bottom of the arms. There's 4 of them. The bottom of the arms it has the gold writing on it with the LEDs. That's how they go on the arms. We'll show you that though. The main frame and these little discs, which I'll explain in a second. So you get 4 of these on the frame itself. This is the front of the frame, because that's where the servo would go with the camera for the FPV style. It tilts the camera when you're flying forward, but we're not going to do that. So anyway, we'll use that as the front of our frame. These little discs are an adapter plate to mount small motors. So if you're using a smaller motor like this on my frame, you mount the motor, as you can see the holes line up, if you can see that. You mount the motor to that, screw it on there, and then these discs with your motors screw on to the actual arm. So you put the disc on the arm like that, and then there are some silver screws included in the kit. And here, those ones there, and you use those to screw those mounts to the arms. If you're using a smaller motor like the 1804s I have here, the RCX 1804 2400 kV. If you're using a larger motor like the 1806s, or I think the 2204s will fit on here too, you can screw those directly to your frame. Motor on top and your 4 screws below, and you'll see that on our orange frame. That's how they are. So that's what these little discs are for. This is the cover plate that goes on the quad to protect your flight controller. These are the legs. They just snap into the bottom of the arms here, and it's just a friction fit. You just snap those in to give you some clearance when you mount your battery underneath, and I'll talk about that too. You can see the slots in the bottom of the frame. That's where your Velcro strap goes through, so you can put your battery on the bottom of the frame. You get these black screws, and that's actually what you use to mount the LED boards to the bottoms of the arms. And like I said before, you mount them with the gold, so your frame is upside down. You mount them with the gold lettering facing down. So that being the top of the frame, that being the bottom, all 4 of those go on like that. Like that, and a single black screw, one of these screws those in, and then your motors screw over top of that. So when you put your motors on, they've got to go over top. Put these on first, and then your motors, whether it be the small ones or the larger ones. So that's how that works. And then your power distribution board, as you'll see in the other video, those are the pads there. That's the top side, so we'd put it facing forward. The bottom side is LEDs, and it's got filtered power sources. One side is 5 volts and the other is 12. And if you read real careful, maybe I'll take this out of the package so we can see. This is the 12 volt side, and that's the 5 volt side. It's written on those little chips in tiny print. So that screws into there, again using the black screws, which you'll see on our other frame. And then in here you also get wire. That's to run from your power distribution board to your LED arms, which we'll show how to do that on the orange one. And you get 4 clear props that go on your motors. So that's an explanation of the parts, and we'll go on with the build on our orange one. Well, because of the arm length on the quad, we decided to solder our motor wires directly to our ESCs. So we took the shrink wrap off of the Emax ESCs. That leaves you with these 3 wires soldered to the 3 pads. So we're going to desolder those wires and solder our motor directly to the ESC. So we're going to desolder these 3 wires from the pads on the ESC. I've got the soldering iron set about 725 degrees. Get a little fresh solder on there, onto the wire. More fresh solder. There we go. And we'll just take all of these off. A little fresh solder, transfer the heat. And we'll get all of these old wires off. There. So what we're going to do, so what we did, we'll show you here in a minute, but these motors, the Emax motors, come 2 counterclockwise rotating and 2 clockwise. So we need to verify when we soldered the wires which were counterclockwise and which were clockwise. So if you look at these motors and the 3 wires coming out, if you wire them straight on to these Emax ESCs, the inside wire to this pad, the middle wire to the middle pad, and the outside wire to the 3rd pad, the motor will spin counterclockwise. So these ones, what we're going to do, solder the first one, to the first pad, the outside one to the middle pad, and then the inside middle wire to the end pad. So we'll have 2 counterclockwise, 2 counterclockwise, hopefully. I'll add a little fresh solder to these pads. And that one's got enough. So the inside wire to the first pad. Might need some fresh solder again to transfer the heat.
So because the motors are wired differently, counterclockwise and clockwise, if you solder them all the same way, then they should turn the correct way. Is that what happens?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just trying to understand.
I had to think there for a minute. And this is to eliminate bullets or anything to
Connect them. Yeah.
connect them. A little fresh solder. And you just see the heat travel down through the wire, then into the pad, and then you're good to go. There we go. And the middle wire to the outside pad. That's what we're going to do. There. So what we'll do now to test this is I have a receiver that's been bound to my orange transmitter. Signal wire goes to the top, and I'll put it on the throttle channel. just like that. Now these alligator clips are on a XT60 plug, which I will plug into our battery. Watch, this one won't work. Wouldn't that be funny now it's on camera? Turn my radio on, throttle's down. There we go. And it's spinning clockwise.
Perfect.
So on these Emax motors, the silver topped ones are clockwise and the black top ones are counterclockwise. So a little bit of throttle, and there we go. So then we'll unplug our battery.
Maybe show a bit of you putting heat shrink on there.
Unhook that. And we'll get some heat shrink. You want just enough. We don't know if any of this is in shot or not because we can't see on the GoPro. Just enough to cover the ESC. And pull that through.
If that's in shot there, but anyway.
Yeah. There we go. I'll bring the heat gun over here. Perfect. Just so everyone knows, because we had the same question. So there's the top of the PDB board and the bottom. On the bottom, it's got filters. One side is 12 volt filtered power, the other side is 5 volt filtered power. So obviously, this is set up for if you want to connect an FPV camera with filtered FPV camera and transmitter with filtered power. That would be the 5 volt filtered power out, and this is the 12 volt filtered power out, positive and negative, and then the rest would just be 12 volt whatever you feed into it. So if you you can connect to any one of these, your battery, your plus and minus, and then the rest would be positive and negative 12 volt, except for these two, which will be filtered 5 volts out, or this one filtered 12 volts out. We're not going to do FPV with this, so it doesn't matter. And the front of the frame is obviously this, because that would be where the servo goes on the FPV edition that tilts your flight camera when the quad's going forward. So this would be the front of the quad, so we're just going to mount this that way so our filtered power sources are at the front like they should be if you're running FPV cameras in the front. So we're going to screw this back down and tin our pads and stuff. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll tin our pads for the LED connections on the bottom of the arms. You have to run this. This is the length of wire you get. We'll cut it to length next, but we'll tin the pads to connect the LEDs to. So on for each arm, we'll tin 2 pads close to where the wires would come. So a positive and negative. The positives are on the outside, the negatives are somewhere else. So I've got a angled tip on my soldering iron, and we're going to tin these pads. So I'm going to do a positive and negative for each. Just a good blob of solder. There. That one. I'll do a positive and negative for this one. A little fresh solder on your iron always helps transfer the heat. See, it's still nice and shiny. I've got the iron set to about 700. And negative for this side. There. Don't need a lot of solder because these are pretty small wires. And then we'll do this set here. And that set there. So there's all our positive and negatives for our LEDs on the power distribution board set. Maybe I will do a positive and negative for our battery as well. Sorry about that, I hit the camera. Let's see. We'll do these ones here for the... I'll put a little more solder on the battery ones. There. So now we'll flip it over and we'll have to tin the pads on the LED arms as well. So that is these pads here. It's the negative and positive, which provides power from the power distribution board for your LEDs, and that's going to be connected with the wire that's included once we get it cut to length. So I'll tin those now too. A little fresh solder. Proper tip makes all the difference when you're soldering stuff like this. Keep hitting the camera, my apologies. I think my little piece of solder here will do the rest. And there, that's it. They're all tinned. So what we need to do is figure out a length to go from each of these little points around to the power distribution board for each of those little sections. So I think what we'll do is, if I just kind of hold it like that, and we can probably run that right to there, so coming to these points here. So if I cut it to that length, that should be good. So we'll cut that one. Cutters. And we'll just part that wire. It might be kind of hard. Might need my knife or my cutters again. And just carefully in the middle of those two wires, give it a little cut. We're going to strip that anyway. Just so you can pull those apart a little bit like that on either end. There, and just use your fingertips. It's nice soft wire. You can just pull a little bit of the coating off like that if you just use your fingertips. You just need a little bit. There. And what we'll do, we'll tin that as well. Get the old trusty helping hands over here. I think we should be able to see that.
Yep, it's in the front.
Get our other wire. I should really change my tip for this, but it won't take much to tin the ends of those. a little bit of solder on each of those. Just like that. So I think what I'll do is I'll change my tip to my finer one for soldering the wire itself. So just give us a second.